Okay. So for those of you in the frame location or in the frame space, just be aware we are about to start streaming, so audio will be broadcasting once that happens. And hello, everybody. We're going to get started in just a few minutes here.
All right.
Ooh, it got all quiet. This is fun.
Anyway, so we were saying.
Are you okay, Tom? You ready to check audio levels? No? Okay.
I like this medium because it helps you become comfortable with silences.
Streaming is working, audio is working. Okay, cool. We have about 2 minutes before we get started, so I'm just going to say hello. Real quick, show of hands. Who's never been here before? One has never been here. Everyone else has been to this event before? Wow. We got a bunch of repeats. Okay. And we'll see if Scott Lynch and his crew are going to make their way over here. I'm not sure. They said that they might, but I see Scott working at his desk, and I see some of the other folks walking around, so we'll see how that goes. But part of the reason that I'm talking right now, just so you guys know, well, again, since most of you have been here, you're already aware of this, but we do run this event in 3 locations simultaneously. It is taking place here at 2112. It is taking place in Frame VR, and it is also streaming to Augmented World Expo's YouTube page. And Tom over there is going to monitor all 3 spots so that when we get to the Q&A, if we got questions from anybody on the stream or anybody in, well, Caroline will actually monitor who's in frame. But I'm talking mostly to test audio to the stream. That's kind of the main point right now, just so you guys are all aware. Excellent. All right, we're ready to get started. So once again, this time, if I remember, I'll advance the slides appropriately. Welcome to the next evolution. Tonight, we are going to be talking healthcare, health science. And we have a pretty cool panel who's going to be talking about this stuff. For those of you who don't know, my name is Matt Wren. I'm the founder of VRAR Chicago. Oh. There's the problem with using a microphone. All right, so I'm the founder of VRAR Chicago and The Next Evolution, which we started back in 2017. My expertise spans a lot of emerging technologies beyond just immersive technology, but if you have any more questions, feel free to just come up to me afterwards and say hello, and I'm happy to talk about myself when I'm not being recorded. With that said, this event is The Next Evolution. It is also co-branded AWE Nite Chicago event series. It is now and always will be 100% free to attend. With that said, it is not free to produce. So I have this QR code up now. We would love any sort of support you guys can make, whether it's paying for a ticket, even though tickets are free, or just donating through the QR code. I'm going to leave it up there for about 30 more seconds, not even 30 more seconds, about 5 more seconds. And then we'll keep going. But yeah, they should be moving with me. So let's do that. That would help. And I can go back and do my other slides. Are you seeing the slide progression in the virtual space? Yes, no?
Let me see.
Okay.
Yes, we are.
Sorry about that. Just doing some testing. As always, the technology gods are looking poorly upon us today. Anyway, so there is our donation link for the QR code. Because again, it's not free to produce this event. It takes a lot of technology and a lot of time. But with that said, as I mentioned before, the next evolution is AWE Nite Chicago as well. There are 30 AWE nights that take place all over the world. We would consider attending the actual AWE conventions. They are great conventions. If you're going to be working in this technology, you really should be there, frankly. It's the biggest event for this type of technology. AWEU just took place last week in Vienna. From everything I've seen, it was a great event. And USA will be the next one coming up next June in Long Beach, California. But in addition to the annual conferences they have, you also have the ability for attending some of their live online courses by the XR community for the XR community. For example, they have a fundraising prep course for XR startups and a WebAR course, which is now available on demand. You can also check out awexr.com for more information about that. With that said, how many of you have never been to 2112 before? Oh, more people. So Scott, you want to come up and introduce 2112? Awesome. I know a lot of our virtual people probably are not aware of 2112. So he's got a microphone. He's going to introduce 2112.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So I'm Scott Fetters, founder director of 2112. We spent the last 10 years building this, and this is part of a much larger community, but building a space for intentional community of music, film, fashion, sports, design, lifestyle brands, providing intentional community, education and mentorship, and all the physical resources needed for growth. And we're surrounded by Fort Knox Studios, 140,000 square feet of rehearsal, recording, production. So really our goal is to get as much as possible of Chicago's creative sector, thank you, under one roof. And provide a space where both artists and creative aligned businesses can grow. And then we're happy to be one of the homes of VRAR Chicago, and also part of the much broader kind of innovation ecosystem in Chicago. So we're very focused on not just bringing together and supporting the creative sector, but that cross-industry collaboration. And we're happy to be part of events like this, looking at more creative technology and healthcare. I'll also be around all night and kind of hanging out after if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Scott. All right, so I did mention this a little bit before during the open networking, but the other place that we host this event is called 1871, which is Chicago's technology incubator at the Merchandise Mart. So again, as Scott mentioned, it's sort of the broader innovation ecosystem in Chicago. You've got 1871, you've got 2112, you've got M-Hub. There's a lot of technology incubators. Matter, I don't know if they have a physical space anymore, but they were sort of the health tech incubator space. But yeah, the 1871 is the other place that we host the event. That's what we'll say, and we'll be there next month. But with that said, I am now going to hand it over to Caroline Dennis, who is our virtual host and in the frame space. Caroline.
Welcome, everybody. Good evening. I'm going to invite our audience here in the virtual space to make their way to the chairs in the audience. We were having a really dynamic conversation about health and medicine and just how we're all understanding and interpreting this industry. But my name is Caroline Dennis, and I'm really happy to be here. I have a lot of different things that I do, all under the umbrella of a practice I call 2 Degrees, where I work with founders and organizations to help them both navigate and understand adjacent technologies and be able to leverage those technologies, whether that be XR or blockchain or precision medicine or robotics. I have the pleasure of working with VRAR Chicago, and that expands my ecosystem in my brain about how these are being applied in different industries. I'm also part of XR Women, which I'll talk about in a minute. I'm also working on an organization that's working as a global incubator to build inclusive, sustainable, smart cities, which is a mouthful. It's called Symphony. And we're working with the IEEE to build some standards around it. Let me share a little bit about XR Women. I've been involved with them for about 3.5 years. We're a global collective of women. We're over 1,000 women now. We've been meeting every week now since really since 2019. We're celebrating our 200th event in January. We've had 200 consecutive events on a variety of platforms, Frame being one of them. We have a museum and a research corner. We're really interested in empowering and bringing forward women in the industry, and also helping to educate and mentor women who are exploring and studying this industry. So we're in an environment in our virtual audience here where we had this really dynamic conversation about XR. Some of us with avatars that look kind of like ourselves, or at least we have pants and shirts and hair and all that other, and others that have, you can come to this platform called Frame VR. It's free. It's very easy to use. You just have a link and you click on it. We'll get more into the platform itself, but you can access this from your laptop, from your phone or from a VR headset. So I'm going to turn that back over to Matt. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Caroline. So in addition to our location sponsors and obviously the hosts, we do have a couple of other community partners that help us make things happen. So Venity is our NFT partner. Unfortunately, we have not been really doing the NFTs for about the last couple of events. We've had some problems with it, but we did collect them all last year and earlier this year. In addition to that, 2 Degrees, which Caroline just mentioned, the Independent Game Developers Association of Chicago, Envision, and Patched Reality. For those of you who are having some of the beverages here in our physical space, you'll notice that a lot of them are Revolution Brewing or System. They are our beverage sponsors and our partners, and we'd like to thank them as well. But with that said, you guys are all here to hear about immersive technology and healthcare. And with that said, I'm going to hand it back over to Caroline to introduce the topic.
Thanks, Matt. This one is really special to me because I've worked in this industry for a really long time. But let's talk a little bit about immersive technology in health science. It really offers a whole dynamic ways to improve patient care, education, rehabilitation. And these technologies provide experiences that feel nearly as real as the physical world. Yet with added control, safety, flexibility, and as we were talking about earlier, the ability to measure. And I think that that's something that's really important as we look at how to validate and build the credibility of research that's being done in these spaces. So VR and AR open up realistic hands-on practice in a risk-free environment, which is very important. Medical students can engage in virtual surgeries, performing and repeating procedures without limitations, building confidence and familiarity, reducing mistakes when they transition to working with real patients. AR can be used to assist surgeons by overlaying digital images directly onto a patient's body, like providing a clear 3D map of anatomical structures to enhance accuracy and decision-making during surgery. Immersive tech is also reshaping patient rehabilitation, such as making the process more engaging, more fun, let's face it, and even enjoyable. This added layer of interaction and immersion helps patients stay motivated and can lead to better, faster recovery outcomes. These technologies also provide new methods to create, share, and manipulate information, and new platforms and ways in which people can discuss and collaborate on this information. So I think that this is a great liftoff here. We've had several folks. We just recently had a woman who's doing craniofacial complex surgeries, actually based in Chicago. So I'm really excited to have with us our panel, both in person and virtually. I'd like to ask Julia Scott to come up to the stage and join me here. So let me tell you a little bit about Julia. Julia Scott is Director of Brain and Memory Care at Santa Clara University. Her lab explores the use of immersive and wearable technologies for healthcare applications. As a senior advisor to an organization called XRSI Medical Council, she works towards enhancing data privacy and user safety standards for immersive healthcare, which is really critical. She co-founded Gambit Labs to develop biofeedback, game-based interventions for ADHD. Thanks so much for coming, Julia. We're really excited to have you here. We're going to have our questions and answers after we have our speakers. So I'd love to turn it over to you, Julia, if you would like to, and our producers in Chicago will be driving the slides for you. Welcome.
All right. Thank you so much for having me here today, Caroline. It's really a privilege to be able to present and share the work and learn from the rest of the group here. This is definitely a field where working in isolation is not an option. It's always takes teamwork and that iteration and a lot of creativity. What I'll be sharing today if we can have the slides up, is, there we go. Okay. Sorry, I forgot to turn around before. Okay, there we go. Is just a little bit of what we do in the lab. The Brain and Memory Care Lab sits within the bioengineering department, and then it is part of a multi-department organization called the Healthcare Innovation and Design Program. And so what we do in the lab is to really look at the problems within healthcare that are not being solved by conventional means. And so we work with companies ranging from Varian Medical Systems for radiation therapy to Cephia Biotech, which does like bioassays. We can go to the next slide. But my particular area of focus within that is the use of XR technologies in combination with biosensing. So primarily EEG, but not exclusively. And when we're looking at different aspects of neuromodulation, we're beyond the neurofeedback aspect, we're also looking at photobiomodulation, which is using near-infrared light to modify our physiology and applying that to the brain. So there are quite a range of things this can apply to. So this is kind of described as neurobehavioral. And so the applications have been in mental health all the way out to Alzheimer's disease. Go next slide. And like there are numerous verticals, as I was describing. One is in developing biofeedback applications, and there you see the titles for two that we have developed. I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm going to be talking about the other two verticals in dementia care and neuroimaging applied to VR therapies. So next slide. Okay. So when we started this project 3 years ago, the dementia caregiver training, it actually didn't start expressly with that. We were working with a foundation focused on innovations in dementia care, and we started with a needs-based assessment of what caregivers needed and what technology could help solve. Where are the intersection of those two things? We had 4 possibilities in our shortlist, pitched that to the panel from the foundation, and what they selected for us to develop and commercialize is a simulation based training for dementia caregiving. And so this particularly puts the person in a first-person scenario with the challenges that are characteristic of dementia in our first versions, really about Alzheimer's expression of dementia. And you're faced with a scene, then you give a choice, you make a choice, and then see what happens. And you go through this iterative first-person learning in order to learn this more effectively and organically. Next slide. So I'm going to show you a sample of that, if we can go ahead and play, of what it kind of feels like to be in this.
The park? Yeah. Juliana!
It's not playing here.
What? I just want to be left alone. Why don't you just leave me alone?
We can see it on the other screen, Juliana.
Look,
Okay,
Juliana has
Julia,
her shoes
yeah.
on. Why don't we join her? Yeah?
Okay, so that kind of gives you a feel of it. And what we've done from that is then license it out to a nonprofit formed for this purpose called Content for Good. And they are producing additional modules and the entire educational program around it, and doing that in collaboration with the leading dementia caregiver training organization called Positive Approach to Care, so that we're getting the best expertise in dementia care and also the technical expertise in 360 video production for VR. So that is an ongoing project, and you can go to Content for Good for the most recent versions of that. Next slide. The other project to kind of talk about here is the virtual embodiment therapies or training. And this is where we can start to look for the biomarker evidence of how it is working. And virtual embodiment is using your visual system to perceive body movements, right? So not necessarily that you are doing the movement, but you are seeing something synchronously moving with you, and your forms memories of that movement. This comes from an analog technology of the mirror box, and so this has been used to treat phantom limb pain. And as someone moves their existing hand or foot or so on, and it's reflected on the other side with the amputation, the phantom limb pain actually subsides because you're getting the feedback of the visual relaxation of that limb. In VR, that can be done as well by reflecting the movements from one side of the body, from one controller or one hand tracking to the opposite side. And so this is done in a mirroring technique within the application. And what this will do is reinforce normal movement of a limb that may not be moving normally because of pain or chronic injury, to open that window for them to regain their full function. Experimentally, we compare this to the breathwork condition or the mindfulness activities within the application called Karuna Labs. And in the breathwork, there's no avatar involvement. It is just guided breathing. In the active conditions, there is representation of the avatar. And so the hypothesis here is that when the avatar is involved and those movements are involved, it should engage specific regions of the brain that are either involved in motor imagery or involved in pain perception. And so we ran this experiment in 20-something healthy people. If we can go to the next slide. This is the full interface of what it looks like as a therapy with Karuna Labs. And you have many varieties of physical activities, upper limb and lower limb, and mindfulness activities. And the actual activities that get used are prescribed by the therapist, and then it is used at home. So that's kind of how this gets deployed. And the primary indication for this application is management of chronic pain. And the Karuna Labs slogan is "Unlearn Your Pain." Right. So we're kind of trying to build the evidence behind that statement of, are you actually unlearning the pain or creating new memories about that source of physical pain? Okay, next slide. Yeah. Okay. So we compared the breath work to the active engagement of the avatar. And what we found was that based on the EEG, so measuring brain activity during the actual movements, so we put on the EEG, we put on the VR headset, and we go, is that when someone is in an embodied activity, it does engage those motor areas, it does engage the visual attention, and those two things together are the largest signature of what the cognitive processes are occurring during the embodiment activity selectively, in contrast to the breath work, which is more related to focused relaxation, which is frontal lobe areas. And we did not see that distinction between the two groups. It was really about the motor imagery and the visual attention components. So this is one step forward in getting those neuroimaging markers related to therapy. So next step would be to do this in a clinical group that actually has chronic pain. But we first needed to know what EEG metrics to look for. And now we have that. Okay, next slide. So those are kind of highlights of what can be done with these tools in the lab. So it's really, we can extend it from there. That's not the full capacity of what happens, but it kind of shows the range of how we use XR in health applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. There's so much there that I want to ask questions about, but we will have time for that later. Thank you again. Back to you, Matt.
All right. Thank you, Julia. Up next, we have Alex Castedo. How close am I? That's good. Okay, cool. Alex Castedo is the chief product officer at Education XR. Normally, I would have figured that out ahead of time, but we were dealing with technical issues, so I didn't get a chance. But Alex, where he's been pushing for the democratization of XR, making everybody an XR creator, is his ultimate goal. How this works, because we didn't get a chance to actually talk to you that much ahead of time, is just tell me when you want the next slide, and I will put up the next slide, or tell me when you want the videos to play.
Hello? Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I'm Alejandro Castedo. I've been working in XR since basically 2012. I started in education. I come from theoretical physics, but my goal has always been to, enable XR for everyone. This is why we started Education XR. Education XR is a platform that came from healthcare, which is why I'm here today. But I want to tell you a little bit more about how we're trying to, make everyone a creator, right? Put the tools in the hands of people that actually want to make things in XR. So, oh, awesome. Yeah, so these are some of the customers that we work with. We're basically primarily an enterprise company. So we work with companies like Siemens, GE Healthcare, Mayo Clinic. So all in the healthcare space, that's where we come from. We started with Cleveland Clinic, making medical education for first and second year anatomy students. But we saw an opportunity to actually create a platform that could work for anything, right? And this is where Education XR came from. Our platform is basically a cross-platform immersive creation tool, basically. And I'll talk a little bit through the video. So if you don't mind, you can just play those off. That's not the video. No, no, that's farming thing. So anyway, I'll keep talking through it. So Education XR addresses creation, deployment, and distribution of immersive content to all platforms, mobiles. Yeah, let's do that. So here's a little trailer. I'll talk through it. As I was saying, it addresses the creation, deployment, and distribution of immersive experiences to all devices. So we'll show VR, but we'll show mobile phones, we'll show computers. Anything that's created with Education XR is automatically multiplayer, automatically deployed to all devices. And creators don't have to worry about that. We've been creating immersive experiences for so many years that we understood the pain point that it takes. And what we want to do is basically, make that easier for anyone. The experience that we have from our customers is that everyone wants their specific content in a specific way. And they don't want to depend on other people to, control their digital content and how to create it, how to update it, how to distribute it. And like I was mentioning before, democratizing this is very important for us. So Education XR provides the creation tools. It's built on top of Unity, so you get no code, drag and drop tools up to, if you are an expert developer, you can just code your own stuff with C#. And once you click publish, it just goes to all devices. Like it's showing here, phone, tablet, desktop, spatial computing headset. Today, we support any PC VR headset. We support the Vision Pro. We support mobile VR headsets like the Quest, like the Pico headsets. And what we're trying to do is, just at your fingertips. What do you have that you can access that immersive content? Just use that. Because yeah, XR and VR is amazing and we think is the future. But the reality today is that the adoption is really, really hard. Most people just buy 10 headsets and they use it. Well, how many times? I mean, I'm sure that all of you can tell me your stories about your XR, projects, and they're never that, widespread. So scalability is a big thing in XR. And what we observe is that by making the content available in all devices, it gets adopted faster. It gets that excitement going. And it's really the gateway to XR, I have another video that I want to show here right after. And we just made a deal with the DoD to integrate artificial intelligence into the platform. And this is our first release. We have an AI assistant that knows about your specific information depending on the course that you have and the documents that you upload. So here we're showing it how it works in PC, Macs, and tablets. But again, one of the tenets of Education XR is that it works across platforms, right? So you can, reach this assistant, use natural language processing, so just your voice, no matter what the device it is. And please, come over afterwards, and I'll show some demos about it. And this is just the first step, right? LLMs have been, exploding for the past years, and we want to put them in the hands of the creators again. So the AI assistant is the first step. The next step is making those LLMs work for you in creating that content. Again, the ultimate goal is to make anyone a creator, make anyone give the tools that, to create anything that you might want to, right? And after the video, if you don't mind, just go back to that customers slide, and I'll talk through some of the use cases that we have. Yeah, there we go. So Siemens Electric creates courses, and they're creating of their own. They have a team of 2 instructional designers down in Mexico, and they're just creating courses. They're creating courses across their whole electrical devices, like electric boxes and house things. UNMC at CDC, we actually have a contract with the CDC for infectious prevention and disease. This came, from grants that came during COVID time, but this is being used for teaching, actual, infectious prevention control experts how to deal with these processes. Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, they do courses for nurses, and I can show any of these courses. I can show them because I have them available. And the Air Force is the one that just gave us that deal to integrate artificial intelligence. And again, I can talk about any of this, but we have use cases across any type of industry, right? The thing is, 3D immersive creation for anyone, basically. And I hope that was my time.
Yeah, that's all good. Thank you very much. And so you'll come back up so if you could flip the microphone off again, just so we don't get feedback. Yep. And then we'll have you back up here for the Q&A portion. But with that, that was Alex. And at that point, I'm going to toss it back over to Caroline to introduce our third and final presenter. Did we lose Caroline?
No, you did not lose Caroline. Okay, well, I'm excited. I'd love to invite Greg Adams up here to the stage. If you want to come join, I will stand up here and, yep, and wanted to introduce you, and you can just come stand right next to me or wherever that makes sense. And if you want to go ahead and share your webcam, you can do it with one of the screens here to the left or to the right. Fabulous. Awesome. Welcome, Greg. So I'd love to introduce you to Greg Adams of Reach VR. Sorry about that. Greg Adams is happy to be with this group today and share his experiences building a healthcare technology platform in conjunction with the people at Patch Reality. And Patch Reality, we have one of our advisory board members, Patrick O'Shaughnessy, who's part of that group. Together with a small agile group, the team has deployed a VR experience available on the Meta platform as Reach VR, along with a customer-facing portal to complement the experience at reachvr.com. So I'd love to invite you, Greg, to share a little bit about this project. This is just another layer upon this discussion of health sciences. Welcome, Greg. So glad you're with us.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Caroline. Appreciate that introduction. Also, some of the things you were saying earlier about the potential of VR and AR in healthcare resonated with some of our products. So thank you for that introduction. And Matt and the team at VR AR Chicago, Next Evolution, thank you for inviting me. It's interesting to see other extensions of this technology and learn about other people who are working in it. So again, as you mentioned, Caroline, I'm the CEO of Triad Labs, which is the producer of this Reach VR shoulder health product. I'm the CEO and in charge of product and engineering for it. Larry Triplett is the president and co-owner of the company. He's in charge of marketing and support. And as mentioned earlier, Patched Reality is our key partner that's doing the VR engineering for it. Moonbeam Media is doing the portal part of it. So it gives you a quick, we're not a big team, but we've been working at it for 5 or 6 years, and excited about getting more feedback in the field from the impact of the technology. So from a real high level, and if you could hit the next slide there. From a real high level, what our system does is it's designed to support shoulder health by providing an environment that capitalizes on the fun and distractive elements of VR, as Carolyn, you mentioned, and Julia mentioned, the fun and distractive potential of immersive VR to recruit motion required in an effective journey toward a healthy recovery of your shoulder. And it's designed to run on a Meta Quest platform and run in the comfort of one's home. So even though we're running at home, we're gathering also data about that patient with respect to compliance to physical therapy. And that compliance can help the patient track their own recovery, or also be shared at the patient's desire with their clinical partners who are helping them recover on the journey to a healthier shoulder. If we could show the video, Matt, right now, it gives a quick introduction of what it's about. I don't know if we've got sound on it or not, Matt. You can see from the video that we're tracking volume, velocity, and accuracy of motion during these games. And at the heart of our approach is kind of an adaptive notion. So we're not just running a game, we're actually gathering data about the nature of how our clients are interacting, and then dynamically adjusting the targeting and essentially the VR experience to accommodate constraints, limitations, and then effectively increasing range of motion as they go through the therapy. So if you could hit the next slide, Matt. This shows a notion of smart targeting. We've got the cone, even though it's shown in 2 dimensions, is actually a 3-dimensional cone around the human being. And we do an assessment, measure where they are. We create a model that maps what their current capacity is, and then create a model of a stretched capacity, which is only 5 or 10% of their existing. And essentially measure their capacity to be compliant and stretch them only appropriately during gameplay so that we don't injure them, and can facilitate really physical therapy in the most efficient way to get them to full motion in their range of motion. So if you can hit the next slide, please, Matt, and go on to the next one. This is a quick picture of our master menu, and in that menu, you can see our 5 experiences, and then on the far right panel, even some feedback about the time that we're tracking the patients in virtual reality. If you hit the next slide, please, Matt. This is a blow up a little bit of our 5 experiences. The very first one you can see is a Firefly assessment at the top of the stack. That's the very first experience you run. That experience is designed to measure your volume of measurement. And then after you do that, it unlocks the other 4 experiences, the other 4 game experiences, which includes Space Gunner, Tube Trouble, and Starbeams, and Bullseye. So those are game experiences that run on top of the assessment data that stretch patients into their existing and stretch zones. And the idea is to distract them from the pain and boringness of what a physical therapist might ask you to do at home, and tries to make it fun, distractive, and at the same time measures the compliance that you have with your physical therapist. Interestingly, 60% of us, Matt, will actually experience some difficulty with our shoulder before we call it quits. So it's a pretty pervasive injury or ailment. If you hit the next slide, please. The last element of it, which Caroline mentioned, is our dashboard. And hit the next, if you could hit the next slide, Matt. The dashboard, all this information that occurs during gameplay is stored up in the cloud. And one of the elements of effective recovery is to give the patient feedback about how their journey to recovery is going, and also to collect the data so that their clinical partners could see their progress. They could, if they say that you need to practice 20 minutes a day in physical therapy, your physical therapist can actually have affirmation that that actually occurred, and that information comes from this web-based dashboard that shows your progress, your volume of motion, and your compliance to your care team's time in physical therapy virtually. So that is a 500-mile-per-hour version of it, Caroline. I hope, Caroline and Matt, that's what you were kind of hoping for, to at least give an idea of how we are doing it. As you mentioned, our partner is in the room there with Patched Reality, who I think has done a great job helping us get there. And I'm sure Patrick would be happy to answer questions when it's appropriate, as well as I.
That's awesome. I think it's really fun to think about how these dashboards and how we use an Apple Watch today. I think of my son who had ACL surgery last year. It would be such a nice application to that, because the amount of physical therapy, and I have 4 people in my life who got shoulder surgery, including my mother. So I'm sure in the audience we have many people who had shoulder surgery, and that is a long slog. Let's face it, it's long and it's tiresome. So the implication and ability for this to apply to those settings is pretty incredible. Thank you so much, Greg. We're going to look forward to having some Q&A after this from our audience. Well, back to you, Matt. Thank you.
All right. So this is the fun part. This is where this gets interactive for our audience. Alex, if you would, come on back up, grab your microphone. For those of you in the live audience, if you look behind you, you see Andrew, who's standing there with a microphone. All you have to do if you would like to ask a question here in the physical space is raise your hand. Andrew will get to you. The way that Q&A is going to work. So because we have audience here in the physical space, we have audience on the live stream, we have audience in the virtual space. So Caroline is going to let me know if she has a question in the virtual space. I can obviously watch for hands being raised here. And Tom over there will watch and he'll flag Andrew down if he has a question coming from our live stream. So we can interact with all 3 audiences. That's the fun part of this. But with that, well, first of all, I'll just throw the opportunity up. I see a hand going up already. Yep. So Andrew's going to get to you and ask a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, the first question is for Julia. I found that that fascinating, the idea of the body mirror for pain management of a phantom limb. And I'm just curious, can you characterize, like, what are the benefits of using XR over the traditional mechanism of using the mirror? Like, what do you see as the main like sort of lift in terms of treatment?
Well, when you do it in VR and essentially create a digital mirror, you have the full range of things that you could do. If you're working in a mirror box, or you saw in the picture someone sitting there with their arm extended and having to orient to the screen, and you end up having, or not the screen, the mirror, you have a limited set of things you need to do. Or you could do. In VR, you can work, especially for the upper limb, through the entire range of motion and a variety of activities. Like in the Karuna Labs suite of activities, it's everything from washing dishes, like simulating washing dishes, to playing golf. You do 3-dimensional drawing of shapes. So you're painting in there with kind of a core, like gravity sketch sort of thing. And so it's encouraging more complex movements by putting it into a virtual environment and creating activities and games around it. The other piece that is, in a sense, the same capabilities behind Reach, where you can track the range of motion changes, the accuracy, and so on. All of those metrics are in the back end as well. So the therapist can monitor what the progress is at home, and then not have to do everything in the clinic. So that's the other advantage there.
Awesome. Caroline, again, just sort of, I can't really see you that much, so let me know if you have questions in the virtual space, but we do have another one here in the physical room, right up
no
front.
problem. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, thank you everyone for speaking today. I have questions for everyone, but I'll just start with my first question for you, Julia. You had mentioned that, I thought I'd heard you mention that you were doing some work in the mental health space. And I was wondering if that covered things like anxiety, depression, PTSD, and what that might look like for you.
The area of focus that I have is on things related to attention and anxiety, where those have, not that the others aren't important, but in terms of conditions that have clear physiological correlates and neural correlates, those have a well-founded scientific background in order to begin to make those leaps for the biofeedback part. So if someone has severe anxiety, we're supposed to breathe, right? You're supposed to work through it by breathing. What you're doing is increasing your vagal tone, which then calms down your heart, right? That's a known thing. And so that's kind of the starting points for this in terms of the mental health applications. And similarly for attention, we know what the brain looks like when it's attentive and when it's scattered. Those are super, and from the neuroscience perspective, they're super obvious. So you can tell those two things apart with colors, essentially. So that's kind of the starting points there, where I think the combination of the sensors and the immersive training grounds can really have big effect sizes. Yeah. When it comes to PTSD, the anxiety component of that, the self-regulation, I think can be addressed there. The other components of PTSD are, in a sense, very personalized. So creation of that environment in VR, it's not going to be generalized and work for everybody. It's really something that needs much more customization and consideration and carefulness in the application for the patient safety when it's extending out to conditions like that people are survivors of trauma or have severe phobias. Yeah.
I don't have any questions
right,
here
thank you,
so
Julia.
far, but we have some that I know that I want to ask. But go ahead, Matt, because I'm sure there are some others there.
Yeah, so I was going to throw, this is actually more of a question for Alex here. Just because you said that your platform supports across a lot of industries. So in your experience, what do you see as the biggest benefits specifically of using immersive technology for healthcare? And along with the benefits, what do you see as sort of the challenges that would be more specific to the healthcare and health sciences industries?
Yeah, thank you. In the healthcare space, we mainly see nurse training as an application. There's a growing need to train healthcare professionals in our country, and it just takes a lot of man hours to actually do that. So being able to do that digitally on demand, it's like a huge win. So where we see most of the demand is on creating courses for first-time nurses for all sorts of things, right?
And the challenges?
Yeah, as for challenges, is a boring one, but IT is a huge one. Solving when you want to scale this type of training and you want to deploy it in a healthcare environment, you have to go through all the hurdles of IT, right? So we've had to do a lot of audits and security. Every time we onboard a new customer, it just takes months. So having something that's ready to plug into these healthcare environments is very important, and we've done the legwork for that, and it's getting easier, but it's still a pain.
Is there, I mean, are there things that you can do to accelerate that? Like, do you have SOC 2 compliance? Do you have, are there
Yes.
HIPAA certifications,
We
things
do
like that?
ISO 27000 certification. We get audited every year for that. We have SSO integration across devices, and this is a big challenge for us since we support all devices. We need to be able to support, single sign-on across many different pathways. So, yeah.
Excellent. I don't see anything from the live stream. Caroline, you said you had a couple questions?
I do. I wanted to ask, I guess, Julia, about the neuroimaging project and dementia and the caregiving training. Can you share a little bit more about what are you seeing as the high-level outcomes of that? And I know we saw the video of that 360 video. Can you give me an idea of how did that translate, or how do you think that's going to translate to the patient bedside situation?
So with the dementia caregiver training, we wanted to make this an experiential learning process that can scale readily. So the 360 video interaction that you see there is hosted by Warp VR. And so it can display and function on web, mobile, and in a VR headset. So in that way, it can go out to family caregivers on mobile or web. And then for workforce training, that's kind of the other vertical, and that would be going to staffing agencies, residential care facilities, in order for the onboarding of new employees. And our primary partner on that for the initial adoption is Bright Star Care. Bright Star Care is a national staffing agency, and we're working first with their largest one based in Virginia, DC area. And so continuing to develop that program with Content for Good and with PAC, that is going to become the new employee training for all of their caregivers who will inevitably interface someone with dementia, and then working with Family Caregiver Alliance, PAC, and working on the partnership with Alzheimer's Association, make the web-based versions available free to anybody. So that's kind of the commercialization plan. The neuroimaging work is more research focused, and the validation of the therapy mechanisms. So the long-term goal there is to get that foundational evidence behind it, and in hope make that part of the clinical trial process, so that there is evidence for a mechanism of action and something to corroborate the clinical outcomes and the subjective reports. Did that answer the question?
Did. Thank you so much. So I wanted to turn this over to Greg and Matt. Did you have a question over there at the audience, or want to ask a question to Greg?
Yeah, so actually, what's funny is I actually had a bunch of sort of preset questions that I had for Greg, and his presentation actually answered most of them. So I'm not going to go into any of those. But the one that I will ask, and we'll see where this one goes. Obviously, this is very specific to shoulder therapy. Are you personally, or is your company actually planning on going to, are there any other sort of rehabilitation or any other physical therapy that you guys are planning to address? And if you're not directly, where else do you see that this could be applied?
That is a great question. Right now, Matt, we're trying to focus and be really good, even specifically, not even generically about shoulder, but frozen shoulders. So folks who have that frozen shoulder condition are the ones that we're initially trying to go after. And I think there is, you make a great point. I think there's a lot of potential to use the technology around other joints. The interesting thing about shoulders are they're very complex, and they rotate around multiple axes, and the power and capacity to get metrics around those axes are pretty well suited for our VR applications. So even though it's a complex joint, it's kind of well suited for the technology to collect data around motion of it. So at this point, we're kind of focused on that. We want to be good at that. And if we can demonstrate some efficacy and impact, to get some of the boringness out of physical therapy and distract from the pain that goes along with it. It seems like could be other applications down the road.
Thank you, Greg. Any other? You guys feel free to raise hands if you have questions in the room. You said you had a bunch up front. Do you want to ask any other ones? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. I think I could probably, this question could go to both Julia and Greg. I'm trying to think about, I'm thinking about some of the work that's being done with video games right now, and organizations are trying to align gaming with improvements in mental health. So those are some of the metrics they're potentially trying to capture. So I'm wondering if there's any metrics in term that kind of point to improvements in quality of life, like reduction in stress, improvement in mood, improvement in happiness, that are also captured. So are you by any chance capturing those? Is there like a long-term plan on kind of capturing that thing? Could either of you kind of speak to that?
Go ahead, Karen. Go ahead, Julia.
Not in the projects that I listed here, that wouldn't be captured. But one of the groups I work with outside of the lab, just as a research advisor, is Deep Well Therapeutics, and their mission is aligned with what you're saying there, using games as a vehicle for improving mental health, whether they be commercial games that are just fun like Tetris, or ones that are designed for a particular therapeutic outcome. And so exploring that question of across a variety of games, how do you develop a metric that does track that improvement in quality of life? There are kind of standard metrics out there on how health impacts your general health, impacts quality of life. So those standard metrics get applied, but it's also looking at changes in the behavior within the game. So if someone who's been playing a game for an extended period of time, if they're in a different mood, right? If it's going to elevate their gameplay or reduce their gameplay along these metrics, and simply using the gameplay metrics is one way to report back to the user as kind of a flag of how their mental health status may be shifting. So there's components there, but when it comes to, okay, how does that translate into their real life? Like, how are they doing in their job? How are they interacting with their family? You're not going to be able to capture that without self-report. So it will require like doing those surveys and having the person reflect back on whether over the progression of use of this game, that it may be teaching coping skills, maybe processing some type of trauma, something about their life history. You're going to have to close the loop because we can't observe what's happening out in their real world. But the type of metrics you're going to be looking for is work performance, family relationships, sleep quality. And if you can add, and in my world, my preferred world, if you add ambient sensors to the person, wearables, and so on, you can get a little bit more of that and know what their patterns are throughout the day, which will be indicators on quality of life. So are they exercising? Are they sleeping? Is their heart rate variability improved? Those are other indicators that will tell you what the impact is in the long term.
And before we finish that off, did you want to say something, Greg? Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Caroline. Just real quick, our application has the web part of it does a survey, which kind of closes the loop that Julia was talking about. But we also dynamically collect pain, do a pain survey at the start of our VR sessions. And interestingly, that pain data, along with the survey that we take, is used to track their progress over time, but also shapes the intensity of their VR experiences so that we can be sure that we're most impactful. We don't stretch them beyond we don't stretch them beyond what reasonably we can and actually inadvertently create more pain than we intended. That's probably a tangent a little bit to the intended question, but it is closing the loop, like Julia said, to try to get surveys that affirm the impact and can shape the direction of the VR experiences that we're delivering. So sorry, Caroline, to interrupt you.
No, that's a great thing to add, and Matt and the folks there, and that was such a good question. I think this also brings up our abilities. We were in a discussion earlier before this started with some folks here in our virtual space who have been focusing on the design and creation of different tools and apps. So a little bit different lens than the builders who are building these tools themselves, but we're looking at how is the user interface working. This makes me think about, I've been working with a company that's focused on mental health for teens for middle school, high school. It's called Be Me Health. And they have developed a really very elegant and user interface for teenagers, which is not easy to do, using mobile. And it's developing a lot of simple ways to ask them their moods and allows them to track those things, but not in the typical way that we get surveys, right? Because we're inundated with surveys. I think the whole business of whether it's AI or being able to gauge and measure our feelings as they're happening, I think that is evolving in industries right now. And I think it's going to make all of the work that you're doing, Greg, and you're doing, Julia and Alejandro. I just think it's going to make it a whole different ballgame to be able to actually create these metrics that work. There is an organization, just one more thing, that I have attended some events. It's called the Digital Medicine Society. And what they're very interested in is how are software companies building wearables? What is their process? And how can they make sure that the efficacy and the best practices that they use to create those algorithms and tools has integrity to what the data is that they're gathering. So I just think that all of these things are evolving, which again is another reason why we need all of these different roles to be involved to make these products as effective as they can be. But what a really great question. Thank you for that.
That's a great point, Caroline. In fact, our partner at Patched, we'll be talking with them tomorrow about using some of those passive data collection techniques.
If I may, I'd like to add part of the work that we do with CDC, as they do their content, they're very interested in capturing data analytics, right? So part of our work together was adding a whole suite of web development tools that they could use to create custom analytics for their courses. So with our tools now, you can create custom analytics that are specific to the content that you're creating. So, let's say if you're creating something that is assessing, for example, cleaning surfaces. Right now, we can collect, how much of the surface they clean, how long they took. It really depends on the creator. The creator is the one that sets those custom analytics, and then they get reported in the back end. So we have a whole back end that, collects data specifically on what you are interested on. We also have a web tool that allows you to, submit those surveys and multiple questions tests that you can, deploy immediately from web. So it's something that we're seeing a lot of interest growing on that. As people start adopting more of these XR experiences, they realize that it's not the end of the journey, that they actually need to capture this analytics. So that's why we build that on top of the platform.
All right, so we have a question from the live stream from Gene Walters, and I think this one is pretty specific to Greg. Honestly, anyone can jump in, but Greg in particular, I'd kind of throw this one at you. Are there any studies that show that people can sort of use these games, like the rehab type games, to push themselves harder during a workout, or to kind of push their limits, or frankly expand their limits?
That's a great question, and from us physiologically, and Caroline might have mentioned this earlier, for frozen shoulder and the treatments that we have, it's kind of an endurance trick. It takes persistence over time, and for us, it's a little less about building endurance, and it's a little more about building muscle tone and mass to help support a healthy shoulder. So we have, though, thought about experimenting with putting weights in people's hands, putting some resistance in people's hands, and even extensions of our product that may open some doors, especially in an AR environment instead of a pure VR environment, that would let our clients interact and engage with real objects that may have mass that would add to that a little bit. But we haven't pushed that envelope real hard in our app. Maybe Julia would have some other ideas along that front.
Well, in your application, is it does it require the controllers, or is it a hand tracking for measuring the range of motion and the interaction?
It's right now we're using hand controllers, Julia. We're
Okay.
using the coordinates of the controllers. Yep.
Right. So once that gets overcome and it can be done completely with hand tracking, it does open up those possibilities of interacting with real objects and moving the exercises from. I guess this wouldn't apply for frozen shoulder, but I don't think you're not ready for push-ups when there's frozen shoulder, right?
Yeah, you got a point there. Yep.
Yeah, but once the controllers go away, these possibilities expand. And I'll point to a fitness application. It's not a therapy application yet, but XR Workout is one that is controller free with with pass-through. So wall sits, full body exercises are possible. And then when doing anything in VR, when it's designed well, at least, your sense, I think the audience knows this, your sense of time is altered and your sense of effort is altered. So people will exert more in an exercise application in VR than outside of VR. Even if it is just putting a headset on someone while they're on a stationary bike, they will bike harder if they're in an immersive environment. They'll perceive a shorter amount of time than what actually occurred. So in that way, in principle, you can expand someone's limits physically through training in VR.
It's really interesting, Julia. We had a test patient with one of our physical therapists that evaluated the patient on their pain levels outside of VR. And noticed where the range of motion started creating pain. We put them inside VR, and they clearly moved beyond those points where they previously started, and they were the same. It was motion that was way beyond the point of where they incurred pain. So the distractiveness of what you're talking about is evident. Yep.
It's altering perception.
Yep.
In a therapeutic way.
And I was gonna say, aside from just going through that on the motion standpoint, that works with learning too.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll say about that, like when you're doing training in VR, a lot of it seems very gamified, even frankly straight training that isn't actually really gamified that much. It feels like a game. It feels like you're just sort of doing something as opposed to learning something, which you are learning it by doing it. And ultimately that leads to people doing more training and being more successful at going through training, and frankly taking more time in the actual training and getting through stuff faster. On that note, one of the things, so Julia actually answered this very directly in her presentation. I'm kind of curious to hear from Alex's perspective. You guys are obviously all doing a lot of analytics gathering on the experiences. I'm curious, just because of some of the barriers specifically that you had mentioned in terms of selling this into environments, particularly legacy people who are just, it's always difficult to change what they're doing. How much are you actually baselining sort of the current state of affairs and how long it takes to train somebody or how long it takes to learn something before they do the XR, so that you can kind of use your analytics from XR as a sales tool? Like, are you doing a lot of baseline up front? Are you doing a lot of research into what the current practice is and how effective it is, and frankly showing the improvements?
Yeah, so unfortunately, there's not that much data around it. However, I mean, anecdotally, and I cannot say more than holistically, that is true because there are no studies on it. Uh, People show so far, and this is mainly in hospitals where there are bigger user bases, people show a lot more retention, from after going through the virtual training. Um, Again, I wish that there were more studies about this. The only ones I've heard about have come from companies like Also VR, uh, but I haven't heard of anything else. And unfortunately, we don't have the
It
resources.
sounds like
to
an
do those.
opportunity there then.
Yeah, fortunately, I was going to say we don't have the resources to perform those studies without an external
Right.
partner, but it's open.
Yeah. To add to that, with the dementia caregiver one, the study we're running right now, I don't have the data ready. Since it does run on all these different platforms, we're comparing the learning gains and the confidence changes when someone learns on each of these platforms. So whether they watch videos, do the interactive on the mobile platform or on a tablet versus doing it in the headset. So to kind of bring more of that evidence around what effect doing it in an immersive environment will actually have. So the outcome measure is being retention of the knowledge, and then the second one being their self-efficacy and their ability to do their job as a caregiver. So, need a couple more sites, a few more data points before that's ready to analyze and report out. But that's the type of study that has to get done to demonstrate what effect VR has. Those comparators. Yeah.
And I mean, from a generalized perspective, I'm assuming a lot of us who spend a lot of time in VR in the industry are pretty well aware of the PricewaterhouseCoopers study from 2020, where they were just studying training effectiveness kind of across the board. And the percentage gains that you get are insane. It's, anywhere from 375% in terms of retention to 400% reductions in time for somebody to learn how to do something. So it's pretty well-known study. You can just Google it. It's around. It's the Pricewaterhouse study, and frankly, you see a lot of other articles reference that. But with that said, we're kind of coming up to that point here where I think we need to get our closing remarks. So here's how this works, because frankly, all of our presenters are about to be put on the spot. So I'm going to give them a few seconds. So the way it's going to work is each panelist is going to have basically 20 seconds to give a closing remark about whatever they want. It's entirely up to them. They can basically speak to this event. They can speak to their industry. They can frankly pitch their products or whatever they want to do. It's entirely up to them. But they're going to have about 20 seconds. I'm going to call on them in a random order. After that, Caroline will give her closing remarks. I will give my closing remarks. We'll do some quick housekeeping. And then beyond that, what we will do is, frankly, the event's not over. We still have networking, here in the physical space. We have some drinks. We have definitely the demos. Apparently, I saw Patrick got his demo working, so we can do that one as well. Thanks to Scott. Thank you, Scott. So we're going to have 2 demos. For those of you who haven't actually tried the demos, we would definitely recommend that. But I think I've stalled enough and given our presenters plenty of time to think about what they want to say for their closing remarks. So I'm going to go first, and keep in mind, let's try to keep this to about 20 to 30 seconds. And let's go. We'll go in reverse order. Greg.
Okay, yeah, I think my concluding remarks are that there's just tremendous potential about the immersive nature of VR and AR. And our success, I think, is going to depend on the agility that we can bring creative solutions to these platforms that are infinitely getting more rich and more sophisticated. And if you even imagine turning the corner, mixing this with AI, I think there's tremendous potential to put AR, VR to work in healthcare. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you, Matt.
Thank you, Greg. And since you brought up the AI, you're next, Alex.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, I just want to put in the mind of everyone that if you look back 40 years ago, videos were, something that was so hard to do. You needed a studio, you needed a team, you needed staff. Today, everyone's making videos with their phones. That's where I see XR becoming, a tool that anyone can use to share knowledge, and with the advent of AI and XR, I think they're a match made in heaven. And that's where we're pushing forward. So anyone can be a creator, anyone can share their knowledge through spatial computing.
All right. Thank you, Alejandra. And with that, Julie.
All right. So we've talked a lot about where the possibilities are here, what the power these technologies have, especially when combined with AI. So I think like the leading remark with this is also the caution that like when you're using these technologies, you are gathering a lot of data about the user, and to use that in a responsible fashion, and especially when we're working with patient populations. So I talk about using all this type of bio data that needs to be processed and stored in secure fashion, that in the very, very least is compliant with HIPAA, whether it is a consumer application or a prescribed application. But just keeping that in mind to be responsible with the data.
Okay, Caroline, you're up.
Just quickly, I'm going to dovetail on what Julia just said, and that is that she also works with an organization called XRSI. I encourage you to look that up. It's an organization creating standards, new standards for making it possible for us to create applications and tools and environments in this new age in a secure and best practice way so that all of you can retain your data and not have to wonder about whether your privacy is being affected. I think a lot of the folks here are saying so many things I agree with. I just want to make a plug that there are research projects going on right now, and I encourage all of you to, as Matt said, go and investigate AWE. Go and investigate XR Women. We have a research corner in the immersive space in XR Women Museum, which we're using as a platform. And we encourage anybody doing research, we want to showcase that there. Also investigate and check out the newsletters for VR Air Chicago. So once you start to just have a cognizance beyond just an event, you begin to realize that there's momentum that's happening here. So I would just say this stuff's happening right now. It's being used with patients. It's not just this is happening in the future. So that's what gets me up in the morning. So yeah, excited about that. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Caroline. And I'll dovetail off what you said. So yeah, it's a little bit of the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. So there is a lot of this stuff happening. Again, for those of us who work in the industry, we get to see it. We get to see a very widespread of what's happening around the industry, and the fact that, frankly, this technology, as Julie mentioned, it can be dangerous because there is a lot of data being produced. So you got to be cautious of that, and you got to be careful about it. But at the same time, it is also very powerful, and it's showing amazing results. Frankly, XR technology is you had mentioned how AI is powerful. XR technology is the interface for AI. That's what it is. That's how we're going to interact with it. Right now, a lot of people are typing into a chatbot. Pretty soon, you're just going to be talking to him and interacting with him physically. That's how it's going to work. But with that said, I'll leave it with just the simple thing of the pharmaceutical companies for years have sort of said, if you've ever watched commercials, ask your doctor about this. Ask your doctor about this drug. If you're actually seeing medical professionals, ask your doctors if they're using VR, if they're using immersive technology. Because it is a powerful therapy, or it is a powerful tool, whether they're using it for training or education, or whether they're using it for therapy themselves, or whether they're using it, frankly, to educate their patients on the procedures that they're about to go through. Because there are already studies that are showing that actually reduces patient anxiety, which ultimately results in better outcomes. So yeah, talk to your doctors, talk to your medical professionals about this. It is a growing technology, and frankly, a lot of them are overworked and busy, and maybe they aren't aware of it because they don't get a chance to come to events like this.
Or your physical therapist, Matt. I'm seeing a personal trainer right now. Same thing, because I love Supernatural, which is a lot like the other exercise thing, and bringing it with you.
That one was fun too.
Yeah.
So okay, with that, I'm going to say thanks again to our presenters, and I'm going to let you guys off the hook. So Alex, in particular, you can put the microphone back on the couch and relax off the stage. We're almost there. A little bit of housekeeping. So this has been, again, XR in Health Sciences. But with that said, I'm going to ask for those of you in the virtual space, you can follow along with this. It's a little bit harder. Actually, I think you have the way to do this in an avatar space, but in the physical room here, hopefully you'll play along. I'm going to ask everybody to please raise your hand and keep it raised, including those who are ignoring. There we go.
For those in the virtual space, you click on the emoji at the bottom, and then there's something called emotes. And you see there in emotes, there's a raise your hand, and you can raise your hand, which I'm going to do. Sorry,
all right,
Matt.
so with that said, I will ask you to please keep your hand raised if you think that this program was worth spending some of your precious time. Awesome. Ooh, I got actually an additional hand raised on that one. Now, please keep your hand raised if you think that this program would be worth paying $5 to attend. Everyone. If you think it is worth paying $10 to attend. A few of you are coming down. All right. $20. Losing people there. All right, there we go. I'm not going to go with the Back to the Future joke. It's just so funny. I don't like Back to the Future. It's not the best video. So with that said, you can put your hands down and relax for those who haven't yet, if you have. Ultimately, we hate asking for money. We hate it just as much as anybody else does. That says it's the ability for us to keep this program running. So I'm going to throw the QR code up again for donations. All the money that we get from donations or sponsorships goes directly back into this event. It supports the technology for the event. It supports the ability to do streaming. It supports us being able to upgrade our equipment. For those of you who are aware, who are here at the very early part of tonight in the physical space, realize we had a lot of technical difficulties, frankly, due to the fact that essentially all the technology that we're using is 100% donated. So that's, we do want to be able to produce this event in a more, frankly, professional manner. And we have the experience to do it. We just don't have the technology. We also like to buy snacks and provide drinks beyond just what our sponsors can provide to us. So all that said, we rarely have enough to go beyond just doing the basic of actually running this program every month. So if you feel up to it and you're able, we would appreciate any donations you can make. And again, we don't like asking for this stuff as much as anybody else does. We are approaching corporations for sponsorships. If you guys are aware of corporations that you think could be available to sponsor, frankly, benefit from having their word out there and understanding the reach that we actually do have, we have a worldwide audience. We bring in presenters from, I think we've got the record of literally the other side of the world with New Zealand previously. But yeah, so all of that said, if you are not able to donate financially, the other thing we will ask you, and this will benefit you, frankly, as much as it'll benefit us, follow us on social media, reshare our posts, get the word out. We are growing this audience. We're seeing more and more people every month, almost getting back to the point where we're at our pre-pandemic levels in terms of having people come into the events. The more audience that are here, the more eyes are on here, the more sponsors, frankly, will see it as well. And they'll see that the reach of this technology. AI took a lot of the flash off of immersive technology, but now people are starting to realize, ooh, when you combine the two of them, it's even more powerful. With that said, thank you very much. I'm going to jump off of this and go to our social media. For those of you who can please, again, follow us, watch our posts, reshare them, refollow them, comment on them. That actually drives a lot of traffic. But next month, we will be talking about transportation, distribution, and logistics. We will be back at 1871 next month in their auditorium. And then January, as we always do in January, it is not going to take place. We almost always do this event on the first Wednesday of the month. January is usually not on the first Wednesday of the month, just like July is usually not on the first Wednesday of the month. And we only do a social event in January and in July. So there will not be a stage presentation. It's literally, let's just get together and have some drinks and hang out and possibly do some, possibly have some technology demonstrations. We'll see about that. We will announce where the location is because, again, we do like to bring that one to some sort of fun location as well. With that said, I will say once again, thank you very much to everybody. If you didn't check in if you didn't give your name and email address to Andrew yet, please do that. For those of you in the virtual space, please put your information in the chat. I'll try to erase it. But we do a giveaway every year. The giveaway either comes through registrations, purchase tickets, the NFT collection. Obviously, we haven't been able to do the NFT for the last couple of events. But basically, by registering for the event and checking in, which is giving your name to Andrew, you are automatically entered. Where's NSC Jay? There's Jay. I'm going to make you raise your hand again because that's the guy who won the Quest 3 last year. So December is coming up. We're getting close. All right. With that said, thanks, everybody. This has been XR in Healthcare, and we hope to see you next month and looking forward to, frankly, talking to a lot of you and trying some cool demonstrations. And I'm going to put the donation link up, and that's what's going to stay there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. It's been great. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Julia and Greg, Ben, all of the folks here now. It was really great having that conversation with you all. Please feel free to drop your LinkedIn in the chat here, or find us on LinkedIn, or you can check us out on VR Air Chicago. I hope we can cross connect everybody here, because I think that's just what we do.